Hello and welcome to episode 222 of the Crate and Crowbar. My name is Chris Thurston and tonight I'm joined by...
Hello.
Hello. It's Philippa War.
I was supposed to say my name.
By Philippa War, who's having quite the time of simply sitting still and waiting for the beginning of the podcast. So... You've had a rough start to this week's podcast because you were bitten by a microphone, something I didn't think that was possible.
And you didn't help me.
You were saying ow, ow, and looking at me.
Yeah, because when it hurts, everyone knows where that is, right?
No.
Okay, well, but, I mean, I had clearly trapped my hand.
Somewhere, yes. But it was difficult to...
But you lifted all the wrong things. It was so painful. It was like, yes.
You're over it now?
No.
Oh.
It's going in the book.
Oh, good. Good. Just us two. This week.
No, oh.
No Toms. One Tom is very far away. The other Tom is much less far away, but very busy.
Okay. Which one?
Francis and Senior in that order.
Okay.
Which leaves it just to you and I, Pip, to discuss the latest video game news.
The news of the day.
The news of the hour. You two have also been very far away recently.
I have.
But we'll get to that.
Oh. Okay.
First we're going to do some news.
Oh,
Yeah?
is it that everything's being remade?
Yes.
Okay, sure.
That's the news.
Okay, cool.
No, Dark Souls Remastered, that's news, is it? Yes.
Well, I mean, you don't really need me for this thing.
I'm just trying to start a conversation, Pip.
But, I mean, is it news?
Yes.
But why?
Well, people like Dark Souls a great deal.
But it exists.
It
They
does.
can just play it.
They can.
You are.
I do.
Right. So what's the hubbub?
You missed a key word. It's remastered. No one knows what that actually means.
Well, no.
It's coming out on the Nintendo Switch, which makes everyone very excited because then you can walk around with it.
Right.
Not useful to this podcast, which is about PC games.
Okay. And
But-
not walking.
You can't typically walk around with PC.
See, that's a design flaw.
If you can, it's called a laptop.
You can't really walk around with my laptop either.
No, that's
can you?
true. So no, I mean, I suppose people do, look, Pip, I just want to do some video game news. It's January. There's not a lot of it. Let's go with what
Final
we've got.
Fantasy, one of them has been is being rejiggered. Probably 12.
Is it?
It's as good a guess as any.
I didn't write it down.
I feel like it's 12.
Okay. We definitely knew that they were redoing Final Fantasy VII.
I mean, yeah, but then that's not news then, if
It's
we
not.
knew it. So it would have been a different one. Any of the other numbers. for
Incredible
example.
if true.
But probably not 15, right?
Yes.
See?
Because that's not out on PC yet.
Well, yeah. That would just be a master.
It would just be the first one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they did say that, but they did specify that, I believe Dark Souls on the PC has been waiting for a patch for a rather long time.
Right.
So it's good news and bad news at the same time that a different version of the game is just coming out in May instead.
Right.
This would mark the third time I have bought Dark Souls.
Why are you buying it again then?
I don't know.
But, I mean, are you going to?
Yes.
Why?
I don't know.
Should you not interrogate that as a purchasing
I like
decision
Dark
a little
Souls
more
and I'm
closely?
excited by this because I like it when the bonfire goes whoosh.
But, I mean, I could remaster everything and you'd, get into
Can
it
you?
again. Well, I mean, I could just put a bow on something and you might buy it again.
Yeah. If
Star
I already
Wars,
like
for
that.
example.
No, that happened once already and that wasn't a good thing.
What if they release the originals?
Yes, I would buy that in
There you
moments.
go. Okay, and then what if they remaster those?
Depends exactly what they do.
Okay, but if they don't add, farting moon rocks or whatever the hell those things were.
Perfect, yeah. Oh, that's all I want, basically, is the original cinematic edition.
Do you want me to just set up a direct debit from your account to Lucasfilm or Disney or
that
whoever?
already exists.
Okay, sure. Great.
The other news,
Right.
moving on from... I just want to gauge your interest in this
Is
news.
it the one about everyone having opinions about Mario Odyssey?
No.
Oh, wait, no, because we're a PC thing.
Yes.
Sure, good.
The next piece of news is the announcement of the new Total War game.
Yes.
Total War 3 Kingdoms. So this is...
Right, which ones?
Well, it's 3 Chinese kingdoms set in, like, late Han Dynasty China.
Oh, right, okay, so, I mean, but like... Okay.
Off the top of my head, I don't know which 3 kingdoms it is.
Okay.
But
No, I thought that might be
it's a fair
news
question
point.
to immediately ask.
Okay.
It's these 3. Because they said last year when they were announcing the kind of the future of the historical Total War games, i.e. the non-Warhammer Total War games, that part of that would be Thrones of Britannia, which is the kind of more focused game about Dark Ages Britain that they're bringing out. We talked about that on the last podcast. But the other one is revealed this week to be 3 Kingdoms, which is, ancient Chinese warfare, which is a historical setting the series has never adopted before and has been a rumoured setting for it for a very long time.
Is that exciting to you?
Yes, although actually I'm kind of amazed by just how many they're making, because Total War is traditionally like a one game at a time kind of proposition.
Right.
And at the moment we've got like really big Warhammer 2 DLC out in like a week or 2 weeks, and another Total War game on the horizon this year, and then maybe a third thing coming along as well this year, it's a lot of Total War.
I mean, it's Total.
Yes.
So, I mean, you'd think...
You're right again.
I mean, that feels sort of like in line
Total's
with
pretty much an anagram of a lot.
Yes. However, is this... Okay. Sure.
Okay, so we got through 2 out of my 3 written down news stories, and with Pip's...
No, I definitely had a question.
Okay, good.
I don't know what it was.
Okay. We'll come back to it.
Okay.
I wrote down 3 news stories at the beginning of this podcast,
sure,
and I am just trying to gauge your interest, which is currently is flatlining, I believe.
I'm trying to help, because I thought that Total War would be very much not my kind of thing, but very much maybe your kind of thing. So I was expecting that maybe you would offer, and I tried to ask a relevant question to like keep your stuff coming out of your face, and then you didn't know the answer to it, and then it's just been flapping ever since, really.
Well, my face.
Yeah, basically.
Okay. Well, so, I'm interested in a new Total War game, but like I say, there's a lot of them coming along. I really like the idea of a more focused, the Saga game that they've said they're making.
Yeah.
And I'm already playing Total Warhammer 2 and looking forward to the expansion things for that. So, I would like to see them, I'd like to see it more than just like another historical Total War, if that makes sense, because I think I've got a finite amount of time to spend on them. I would like to see interesting campaign mechanics or something they haven't done before.
Do you think that this is a good strategy? Do you think that... See, this was my question. I've remembered it now.
Okay, good.
That, do these 3 things cater to completely different markets, or is it that they all ultimately hit similar people and thus we will see total fatigue of Total War?
I don't know. My guess would be that, like, this is all stuff for the Total War fan base, right? Like, if anything was going to break them out into a new audience, it would be something like Warhammer, where it's a very different thing from historical battle, right?
Yeah.
Obviously maybe a Chinese set Total War game will help them find an audience in China. That would be an interesting thing. Obviously that's a very important territory for games, so that might be the business case for doing a lot of different games like this. But, from a kind of like who this will reach, I think without more information, without knowing if they're doing something bigger and newer with the game itself, it's very difficult to say. I think if they just released 3 full or like 2.5 full Total War games in a year, that would probably be like capacity for how much Total War you people can totally war over. Okay, the final bit of news I wrote down, and to see if this one registers a little blip.
Yeah.
Is that Subnautica is coming out of early access.
Oh yeah.
In like 11 days.
I know.
It's exciting. They are finally leaving early access after many years, at a do at Monterey Aquarium in LA, I think.
I'm not sure whether to just shun them for the time being because I want to go there and I can't. Obviously, I wasn't invited and I'm not there. So that feels slightly...
Because I thought this might be the news you'd be excited about, because I know that Subnautica is one of your favourite games the last couple of years.
Well, I haven't actually played it properly in the last maybe year and a half. I have been...
Apologise for the noise of me opening a can of beer.
I've been trying to stay away from it so that I could actually do the story stuff. Like, I've never really done the story stuff, and I've sort of... when I have needed to dip back into it, I've done it with sort of my eyes half closed to try, try and stay away from that stuff. And I've never looked too closely at end game things or people talking about that kind of stuff. I don't go on the subreddit or anything like that. So I'm looking forward to playing it as close to new as I can. I think.
This must be exciting, though, that it's actually done.
Yeah, it really is. There was an update which flashed up a few weeks ago, I think, called the Eye Candy update, which was very much a kind of final graphics pass, I think. And I did look at a couple of the models and stuff, and it looked really cool. So, because I really loved the art, even when it was sort of not that final stage.
We should probably back up a little bit and explain what Subnautica is now that it's coming out. Because I know you've spoken about it on the pod before, but this is
It's an underwater survival sandbox where you have crash landed in an alien ocean and must survive. There are varying difficulties, and there is now a story mode of some kind that I do not know anything about. So, yeah. Artifacts and the like, I believe. I remember kind of seeing.
More big fishes.
More big fishes.
Do you not find it terrifying?
Why would I? I like the sea.
Giant fish are terrifying.
No.
Okay.
I like them. I spent the last few days just looking at them. And I saw some whale sharks and stuff. And that was great. Manta rays, they're enormous.
They are. They're bigger than I thought.
Indeed. And I've previously scuba dived and stuff, so yeah.
Very much your thing, under the sea. Yeah, but no, that's...
You would be terrified.
I just don't like the idea of something big coming out of the sea.
But they don't come out of the sea, they stay in the sea.
Well, I mean, coming out of the darkness under the sea.
Oh, right, okay, yeah, no, you're not going to like the sea, then.
No,
are you, really?
that is true. Actually, I like it in abstract.
But,
what? I don't want to be in it.
Okay. So
ideally.
How do you mean abstract, then?
The thought of it.
Okay, but
not too much, because that's scary. I like to think about it a bit.
Okay.
I'd like to see it. Like, over there.
Okay. Do you like being on boats?
I'd like to specify that I do like to be beside the seaside, but not under the sea, where the Leviathans are.
Okay, but, I mean...
Do I like to be on boats?
Yes.
Somewhat.
Which boats?
Like, rivers, fine.
So punts.
Or like
And
rowing boats?
Like that Oxford rowing nonsense.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, yes.
No, yeah, okay, that's fine. That's not really, like...
You're not scared of pike?
Actually, now I am. Good, finally. The last body of water I wasn't terrified of.
Baths?
Baths are fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Because there's no pike in the bath. How do we end up talking about this?
Swimming pools?
They're fine as well.
Okay. What if there's a wave machine?
Little bit scary.
Okay. Cool. What if there's a bigger kid?
Terrifying.
Okay.
What if he looms out of the darkness? The Leviathan child.
Murderings sometimes happen in pools on television.
That's true.
Yes. I'm not helping, am I?
No.
Okay.
Subnautica. None of these things happen in Subnautica, though.
Who knows? I don't know. I wouldn't know, would I? I made a garden and then I stopped playing for the good of my people. I don't know.
People?
Well, no, that was just a word.
You were playing a lot of Subnautica at that time.
I was. But yeah, well, I think it will either feel like a totally different game or it won't. I'm really tired.
I know. Well, you're very tired because you've come back from America About 2 days ago, but let's not get caught up on the details.
Why would you say that?
Because it's true.
Yeah, but why did it need to be said? As if, like, there's a statute of limitations on jet lag.
That's true. It can hit you a few days later.
Right.
And it has.
Yes, like a truck.
So, you've got back from Atlanta.
Yes.
Atlanta.
Okay.
I don't know why I said it like that.
No.
I don't know why I said it like that twice.
Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah. Why were you there?
I was there for HRX 2018.
What does that stand for?
The Hi-Res Expo, which is the annual sort of showcase and esports extravaganza that the studio Hi-Res puts on each year.
Hi-Res being the developers of Smite and
Paladins, and now Bot Smashers, and you will always fly the flag for Tribes.
Tribes Ascend, formerly. Yeah.
Yes. And is it Global Agenda?
It was their first game, yeah.
That was them. Yeah.
Yeah. This is the first one I haven't been to. I think I've been to all of them since the first. And I was sad not to join you this year.
It's like they say in Pokemon, got to collect them all.
That's... Like they say in Pokemon, famously, you've got to find and keep every single one of them.
Have you got them all, they say?
Have you checked? Do you know where your children are? It's 11 o'clock. Pokemon. So you're at Hi-Res Expo.
Yes. Collecting them all.
Did you? What am I talking about? So I thought we could, obviously, there was the esports stuff, but that's not, going to mean loads to most listeners of the Crate and Crowbar, other than how was it?
It was interesting in that this year felt very much not about the esports, if you see what I mean. They were there and they were happening, and they were obviously a sort of a big attraction to people who were there, but it felt impossible to watch Paladins and Smite. And with the stuff that I needed to do for work, which was previewing the new Paladins mode Battlegrounds, which I am assuming is what we will spend the majority of the time talking about. Between all of those things and keeping an eye on other stuff and doing interviews and attending like roundtables and stuff, it felt the first year that I hadn't been able to settle down and actually sort of absorb the esports,
right.
If you see what I mean.
Yeah, it's become, last year it was steadily becoming more of an expo. And so I guess that's only continued, which makes sense, because it's becoming
they had
like
a keynote for the first time this year.
Right. It's kind of becoming like a mini BlizzCon for them, I think. That's the model.
No, that doesn't work. ResCon?
HruxCon.
Yeah, no.
Or Hi-Res Expo, which is the name they've chosen to give it for this precise purpose.
Sure.
We should talk about, so in terms of like games coming out of that show, Paladins PUBG is possibly the least surprising, but also in other ways, just to land this take directly in the middle, the most surprising.
How both?
Because it's an unlikely direction.
Explain yourself.
It's an unlikely direction to take your sort of RPG-inspired team shooter in. But it's also a logical thing to do if you have any game that can possibly be jury-rigged into PUBG at the moment.
Well, kind of. Although I think, didn't they register Tribes Royale fairly recently?
Did they?
I believe
that changes everything.
No, as in it was kind of because they were using, I think, Tribes art as placeholder stuff, but like they, it was a statement of intent that I think was noticed among the community, but I think people weren't sure whether it was another bite at the Clash Royale style, Smite
that is confusing,
Cherry, or whether it was like a Battle Royale thing or whatnot. Anyway, that's all by the by. So yeah, the big announcement, I think, out of HRX was that Paladins, which is, it's an Overwatch style game, right? Like that's a way of explaining it to people that is understandable.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a class-based team shooter.
Yeah.
And what you now have or will have is this extra mode where you buddy up into teams of 4, so 25 teams of 4, and you get deposited onto an enormous map. I think they said it was something like 300 times the size of their biggest previous map. And as you might expect, there are loot caches to be raided and other people to be splatted, and the map is gradually shrunk thanks to killer fog.
You play as Paladin's characters, right?
Yeah, so there is the full roster of Paladin's characters has been added to the mode, but what happens is you pick from 8 of them. So it's very much about sort of maybe pushing people out of their comfort zone, maybe making it into, ostensibly it seems to be more about making a kind of slightly more casual pick up and play mode,
right,
which is also why they've added Team Deathmatch. They're taking out their payload mode, which is the least played one. It's the one where all you're doing is pushing a payload.
Yeah.
Rather than capturing points and things. And they're replacing that with Team Deathmatch, which is a very, very pick up and play kind of thing. Where, I think the idea behind that was very much to, have something that people weren't also trying to get to grips with abstract objectives,
right,
while they figured out how characters worked. So there's that one, and there's this Battlegrounds mode. And, so it gives you 8 characters to pick from. There'll be 2 from each of the 4 classes, which are frontliners, flankers, damage and support. And then you pick whatever you fancy playing, whatever fits with your team comp if you are being team minded, and then you are deposited on the map. You get dropped in a little Zeppelin, and the grid squares on the map, you just sort of pick one to descend into.
Right, I see. So you pick in advance rather than dropping out of...
Yeah. So you look at the map, and then at the moment it's like a fastest finger first to just select your drop point. And then you go from there, really. And it's the last team standing, so that could be all 4 of you, it could just be 1 of you, whatever.
Yeah. What form does the loot take, given that it's not going to be like traditional like guns and hats and armor and stuff? So you have, I should probably have brought up my little phone screenshots of the things, but basically you have 4 different slots for armor. So I think there's like a jacket one, and some boots ones, and a gloves one, and a maybe even if you're like a big tree man or something.
Basically, and so you can sort of go and pick those up. But when you sort of pick a thing up for your inventory, it swaps the other one into the chest.
Right.
So if you pick up an upgrade for you, but you know that someone else has some really rubbish gear, you can call them over and, get them to switch out and stuff, which is what I started doing with people when I was actually playing with a more vocal team, which was quite nice. And, you can also start shouting out, like map directions, north or 120 or, like all of that kind of navigational stuff. And for example, I was playing with 3 other people who I didn't know, but they were being quite fun and quite communicative. So we dropped, and we saw that we were actually quite near a different Zeppelin that was dropping. So we were trying to figure out how to avoid the others so that we didn't get into a firefight before we were ready, things like that. And every minute, I think, a purple sort of legendary loot thing drops, a chest drops.
Right.
And so you can kind of see them from quite far away, and you need to make decisions about whether you want to go and open it, or whether it's better to sort of stay behind because it might be a trap, or it might be that someone who already has legendary gear is, already over there. And if you die, you're you become like a chest of all of your items so people can like pick up your stuff. So towards the end, you know, you might see someone with all 4 legendary slots, right?
Right.
Because they've picked up all of the stuff that other people have found or other people have dropped or whatever.
Right.
One of the things I think that sets it apart from the team-based side of things is when you get killed at the end, you could actually be revived. Like, you turn into a chicken.
Okay.
So
when you say at the end, what do you mean?
When you get killed,
Right.
as a person, or as a champion rather, if all of your hit points are removed, your model swaps out for a chicken that runs around and freaks out and gradually, you know, loses HP until it either dies or it hits the fog of war, in which case it is immediately annihilated, or a teammate revives you.
Right. That's the same as PUBG.
Is it?
Yeah.
I didn't know
But
that.
you, well, not a chicken, but if you're playing with a team, you get downed when you die,
I
and
didn't
you
know
just
that.
crawl around on the ground. And
I've only ever played it like solo.
right. If you're playing solo, then you can still be killed when you're downed if someone keeps shooting at you.
Yeah.
But you have a chance to crawl behind cover or something like that.
Fair enough. I think they were saying that came from like a ward skin. Like a ward skin in Smite.
Yeah, I can believe it, actually. I mean, cause it's interesting because given that the number of characters is so much more visually diverse than PUBG or even Fortnite, which are all kind of just humans running around, it strikes me that they wouldn't want to do loads of new animations for this, and Paladins, as it exists, has no, like, downed state animation
like
for its
people
characters.
crawling or
Yeah, people crawling, so
yeah, they swapped it for just...
everyone just becomes a chicken.
Yeah. And it was, you know, it makes sense, and that is what they were sort of saying about it. And as a chicken, you just run around. You can't even peck. Just sort of like
Did you complain?
bumbling around. Well, I mean, you know, I'm hoping that given it's only in pre-alpha at the moment that...
Pecking will come.
Yeah, and maybe my change.org petition on the subject. Anyway, yeah, so that's certainly a thing that is part of it. Yeah, no, I'm just trying to think what else you might want to know.
Well, what were your impressions? You know, you said that you played it, but I remember speaking to you about it not soon after not long after you'd played it, and you seemed quite positive.
Well, so it was, I think, as somebody who really, really doesn't enjoy that armor type, like,
Military
soldiery realism, well, not realism, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of like slightly grim.
It's quite sterile.
Yeah, or like, it's just not very nice. I just don't like it. Whereas this is like bright wizards, like flashing lights. I quite like that. And also I think because there's a place for my style of play rather than like people who are good at shooting, you know, like Grover was one of the most popular, and Grover's a support.
Yeah, yeah. I do find that concept really interesting.
So I was asking about it because it's kind of like, is this just like are you going to lose the team aspect because people all just want to be the last one standing? Like, if they are, it makes sense to be a damage dealer, right?
Right, yeah.
So, and I guess we'll just sort of see how that shakes out, like whether people kind of go, oh, you know, I did start playing like that, but then to actually win, we need to be a bit more team oriented, or whether it ends up being like, this is just the mode where everybody who wants to play something with a machine gun or a sniper goes, or, you know, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So,
It's funny though, because like, you know, I can see something like healing abilities or grab abilities, crowd control, those kinds of effects being like changing the dynamic of a battle royale game quite dramatically. Like, even if you're playing solo, a self-heal like takes like, do you find when you're looting those chests and going through buildings and things, do you find like healing items at all? Are you reliant on that for healing?
I can't remember. I honestly can't, because it was stuff like, the ones that I can remember are things like your mount moving a certain percentage faster,
Right.
or, you know, that kind of thing. I do know that they are initially at least intending to have the same card system as in other Paladins modes. So you create decks of cards based on the builds that you like or the play styles you gravitate towards or might need in a particular circumstance.
Right.
And you also augment that with picking a legendary card for more of a boost in a particular direction. So there would be theoretically elements there anyway that would boost or, change the stats on your abilities and on your character. So
cool. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I'm basically just curious because like having a class system is something that I haven't seen these games really do. Like Fortnite has its building system and PUBG has its sort of being the default thing. And so the presence of, like stuns and healing powers and things like that would actually add quite a different dynamic to every way of playing that game, not just team comp, but like maybe it's a good idea to be a healer in solo because you're not as reliant on loot.
Yeah.
So you don't have to put yourself at risk.
So there are things like that, and also just the fact that, like, if you're a sniper, that's great if you're on, open terrain and whatever, but as soon as you're in a cramped building.
Yeah, the fact that you can't change as well, whereas PUBG, you can take the gun of the last person you killed and suddenly now you're a sniper or whatever.
Yeah, so those kinds of things are interesting. I think it's one of those things where it's frustratingly hard to get more than a glimpse of what they're going for because, with the way that the expo halls were laid out, there wasn't actually space for 100 PCs. So most of the time, I think it was playing with about 40 people on, which, as you'll realize, means that it takes a while to get going. There's a lot of like just hiding or walking or whatever, running around or galloping on your mount or whatever, and collecting loot for a while until suddenly you reach kind of critical mass once the map has reduced, and can start actually having those encounters and stuff. So the balance was obviously off for that. They had a few show matches, which I enjoyed a lot more because obviously the pacing felt a lot better and a lot sort of more like you were actually able to start thinking strategically from pretty much as soon as you got into the game, right?
Yeah.
But also it is in so much pre-alpha-ness because like the map itself isn't finessed, like there's a lot of duplication of assets and, a lot of sort of blank space almost. It feels very sparse. And, we were playing without like the loadouts and stuff on. It was just auto, like giving you the automatic card loadouts and stuff. And obviously it hasn't been particularly like balanced and stuff because they've only been internally testing it. And to do that, they need like a quarter of the company to log in and play, right?
Yeah.
So like, I think at this point it's very much a kind of, we'll just get it into people's hands and then figure out what works and what doesn't. So
yeah, what's their plan for A, making it available to people, and B, kind of time scale for that kind of thing?
So in terms of PC, they were saying that the plan is to get it into players' hands in some form by the end of Q1, by the end of March, right? But actual details on what that will be, because Paladins itself is still in early access. So the fact that this is a mode within that sort of muddies that water a bit.
I suppose it doesn't, because if an early access game is expected to change and gain new things, right? So
well, it is, but it means that talking about the mode is a bit odd because it's like the mode won't be finished, right? Until the game. Or, well, I mean, the mode will never be finished because the game will never be finished because it's one of those games as service kind of.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens with that because obviously, basically what happened to Fortnite is they thought they were making this particular like day and night zombie survival co-op game. Turns out they're making a battle royale game because it just became that, mutated into it.
Well, I'll be super interested in that because, I mean, I've had that conversation with them before about Smite because Smite has several different game modes, and obviously if you fracture the player base too much, then queuing becomes a massive problem.
Right.
Matchmaking is an associated problem because there's, like you can reach the point where there are too few people queuing for a thing to either get into a match quickly or to get into a properly match-made match. So obviously that's something that's maybe a concern, but I mean, given the popularity of Battle Royale stuff at the moment, the fact that this is actually doing something, I think, genuinely a bit different.
Yeah.
And that the game itself is free to play, whereas some of the alternatives just aren't, right?
Yeah. Well, that was Fortnite's trick, right?
Yeah.
It's like they were the first to be free PUBG. And they've reaped the benefits of that. And by all means, it's apparently good as well. I haven't actually played it, but yeah, there's certainly a huge benefit to that.
Yeah, so
It's easy to be cynical about this kind of thing when it sort of comes along and it's like, this is the hot new thing and, you know, we're doing that now, I guess. But if it works, then...
I'll be more interested to see what it actually does to the game, like whether it ends up just skewing it entirely to, like you say,
this is Paladins now.
To this, because the other thing is that Siege is kind of the core mode, right? It's the core competitive mode, but they were also showing this stuff as show matches and casting it as a competitive thing, right? Like people whooping and hollering and forming teams and following, you know, like someone around the map and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. Like there were sort of crescendos of action and whatever and skill and so on. So, you know, it's too early really for them to say, because obviously, you know, if it takes off, it takes off. If it doesn't, then all of this becomes irrelevant.
Yeah.
But, you know, I would be fascinated to see whether next year, whether Siege is still the core mode of Paladins.
Yeah.
And whether they make this a particular, like, esport in its own right or try to sort of fold it into that milieu, which is already kind of hard to follow at the event, right?
Yeah. It's interesting, like, because I trust Hi-Rez to do interesting designs. I don't fully trust them to do original designs. I think that's fair. I think they would think that was fair. Because they tend to do interesting things with other people's genres.
Interesting twists on a thing, right?
Like, Smite is probably about as original as it gets, taking kind of MOBA format and translating it to third-person sort of action controls kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, last year when we were at Hi-Rez Expo, it was all about what Smite Rivals.
And Hand of the Gods Tactics.
Tactics, yeah. Tactics, slightly more original because it kind of exists in, it's a card game. It's a Hearthstone inspired card game, but it was on a grid. It's just sort of, I think it was an unlucky instance of parallel evolution that it arrived not long after Duelist.
I was going to say Duelist.
So they kind of look very similar. And then Smite Rivals, which was, a sort of, derived from Clash Royale, which again, and all of these games have their own identity distinct from their clear source of inspiration. But their clear source of inspiration is always something that has recently been extremely successful on those platforms. And this is, you know, it's interesting. Like, it's very easy to be cynical about it. It's very much the model for game development in other parts of the world, particularly China. Like, this is how game development works. You see, take something popular, you do your own twist on it.
I think it's interesting because it's sort of, it makes the business reality of game development visible in a way that I think is unpalatable.
Yes, yeah.
To a lot of people, and I think it makes it hard to sort of evangelize their games if you are a fan without feeling like you're on the back foot or on the defensive.
Yeah,
I think I've written about that before. Like, this idea that even if you do like the stuff, then it's sort of presented in a way that doesn't make it easy for a fan to not have to constantly answer for the game.
The reason it's happening is not a mystery, right? You know, and it would be very hard to buy the line, oh, we just happen to desperately want to do this one day. You know what I mean? It is clearly business led to some extent.
They were open about that.
Yeah,
like, you know,
they typically are, but you're right that that's still unpalatable to people, I think. Rightly or wrongly.
Yeah, I suppose it depends just how you sort of read the direction overall, I guess. Like, I'm more positively disposed towards it because I think that the games themselves have genuinely been fun to play and have like offered something different, but that doesn't mean like not acknowledging the problems that come with that, right?
Yeah, it's a strange set of problems for a company to have, and they've had it for years. Like, Paladins, I thought last year was, I don't know where Overwatch is at now, but I do think Paladins is a better spectator esport than Overwatch is.
Well, we'll see, because the Overwatch League started yesterday, so.
Well, yeah, but, for me, they still haven't resolved the problems I have with Overwatch as an esport, and obviously the marketing budget is vastly different, and the sort of, the visible impact of the investment in Overwatch is very much more present in the game. It feels like a higher quality thing than Paladins does. But on specifics of design, I've often been quite impressed by what Hi-Rez do. It's just that, there's always these little bumps on the road. The art style is another one. Always these bumps on the road to sort of being able to kind of easily recommend their games to people. Because A, the business models are always quite transparent, and B, they don't tend to look as good as their competitors. But yeah.
It's interesting because I also played the new Conquest map, the new version of the Conquest map, which is the main Smite sort of competitive 5v5 thing, and I thought that was actually really pretty. Like I liked the changes that they'd made and stuff like that. So I will hopefully be able to carve out a little bit of time for that to see whether it sticks. It hasn't. I'll be honest, in recent times, like I just don't particularly enjoy playing Smite anymore. Partly that's just because I don't really have any friends who play it anymore either. Whereas I find it a lot easier to dip into a match of Paladins, whichever mode I'm titting about with. So, yeah.
Good. Was it an alright experience though, the week away?
Pardon?
Did you have a good week away?
I had an interesting week away. It was very cold, and I always get that like dry air kind of static shock from everything.
Oh god, yeah, you get electrocuted by everything in that hotel. It's very funny. It's very funny.
But I've realised that because when I came back, obviously, I've found myself hesitating every time I go to open a metal door, like handle. Like I find myself touching other things just to sort of, let the static dissipate a little before I have to touch the superconductive things. So that's been fun.
Good.
I know, just sort of slowly getting back to normal. Chris!
Oh! You surprised me.
Why? I'm right here.
You were suddenly very, very shouting my name.
Well, I thought I would inject a little bit of energy because I feel like I ran out of steam with my...
Pubga. Your Palga.
Pabga chat. I think Alice is trying to make Pladbat work.
Pladbat.
Yes, but I didn't think it worked because surely it should be Palbat. Or
Yes, it's not Paladins, is it?
But, I mean, Anyway, this is all academic.
Is it? What field of academia is this?
Semiotics.
Oh, okay. Yes.
But, I mean,
No, you're not wrong. You're
Anyway, what have you been playing?
So I haven't had loads of time for games this week. I've been reviewing a mobile MOBA, if you want to know how dry January can get.
A mobile.
No. But
what's it called?
I don't want to talk about it. It's called Arena of Valor.
Okay.
It's like the most popular mobile game in the world. It's all right. Anyway, but I have played
Gardenscapes, isn't?
It's not the most popular mobile game in this house.
Okay, sure. Good.
But yes. But I have played about half an hour of Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy.
What state would you say you are at with this massacre game?
I like it a lot.
Bennett Foddies?
I like it a lot. So we've talked about it on the podcast before, on two separate occasions. I think it came up briefly last week because it's one of the other nominees for the IGF. It's basically now an enemy of Tom Francis. The other is that I think the Indiecade episode that, Zach and Kevin did with Tom. A couple of episodes ago, they talked about it as a game that was there, and I hadn't...
I don't have time to listen to podcasts.
I know.
Not with all the murder mysteries I've been listening to.
So I'd sort of had that information, as the person who edited those podcasts had that information in my head, but I didn't really have like a full sense of what it was. So actually, something that I didn't realize is that it's not in because I always thought of it as being a bit like Quap, because it's another Bennett Foddy game. Quap
Right.
being the kind of trying to sprint, but each of your body parts is controlled by a different key, which is its form of masochism. And Quap was an exercise in this sort of mad control scheme. And so Getting Over It is a tribute to Sexy Hiking, which is a game about trying to climb over stuff using only a hammer to pull yourself up. In this, you are a man who is sat in a big pot of water, with a...
I thought that he was just at one with the cauldron.
It splashes when you tip it at certain angles, so I assume that it's full of something.
Yeah,
he can't have very long legs.
I think I just assumed he was fused to it.
He might be, but it does, stuff does come out.
Okay.
So, and sometimes it looks like he's sweating, but I'm not sure about the metaphysics of this, I'm not going to lie.
Sure.
But you're a man in a pot, and you've got a big hammer, and you use the big hammer to pull yourself up and over objects and climb things. And this is done, using the mouse, which is that's the big difference. That's, I think, the thing that kind of makes it for me is that, you're not fighting the controls, although, well, it behaves very consistently. It's very fair. And that means that, even though it's complete, bullshit nonsense, as I think is intended to be, it does mean that I find it, quite fun at the same time. And then, I think on previously we mentioned in the podcast, people have talked about the trailer, which is very good, which has Bennett Foddy's voiceover, almost like a beat poem against some jazz, saying, and the line is, I made this game for a certain type of person to hurt them. And, when I got that, I wasn't sure if that was a feature in the game. It is. The talking is a thing. But I wasn't sure what kind of thing it was going to be. And actually what surprised me about, Getting Over It is that it's kind of an essay as a game. Something that I found quite heartening early on is that at least a big chunk of the early talking, because it does some reactive talking, like, oh, you've fallen off there, that must suck, that kind of thing. But there's a lot of things you just pass a checkpoint, not checkpoint, but you pass a threshold in the game, and you'll get some other meditation on failure or game design. And it's explicit about the fact that it's a tribute to Sexy Hiking and sort of, what it sort of pegs B games and games made out of found pieces and sort of, the kind of punk fringe of game design. And that's really cool. I really like that, and it's quite a thoughtful meditation on, game design and difficulty in game design and what it means to create a challenge and what it means to communicate to the player, what it means to reject the notion that most games share that any challenge placed in front of the player can be overcome. There's a nice bit early on where Bennett talks about, creating obstacles for the game that he couldn't get past himself. And therefore, if he was approaching it with the mindset of a traditional game designer, you would tone down or change or modify, and then realize that the point of the game is he doesn't do it. Because it's just a basic physics simulation, and it's just about banging your head against it until you do finally crack it. And the fact that there's a sort of accidental nature to the challenge makes the challenge authentic in a way that, traditional game challenges aren't, because they're designed to be solved. And it also makes it slightly more authentic to climbing, because climbing is about scaling accidental surfaces, not following a pre-planned route. Or maybe that's the difference maybe between free climbing and, going to a climbing wall, that kind of thing. Most video games are a climbing wall. And that's actually genuinely interesting. And I think it fits. I realized that it's actually in more of the sort of, Stanley Parable territory when it comes to what its offering is than I thought. It's kind of like a little essay, basically. It's an essay that won't let you hear its later sections unless you're very good at hauling yourself up a mountainside with a hammer. But, it is nonetheless game as bit of criticism. And that's kind of cool. And I find it funny because it's also, a profoundly silly looking, looks like it's made in Blender, kind of physics game that looks very silly.
It's a man in a pot trying to navigate a world with a sledgehammer.
Yeah, exactly. And for that reason, it's very YouTube friendly. It immediately shot to, number one on the Steam charts. Most of the big YouTubers you could name have videos of it with 4 to 5 million views. It's been a tremendous success in what I would determine like the Goat Simulator vein, by which I mean make some total shit. Not that it is shit, but you know what I mean? Like
I think it will never not be entertaining to watch people be frustrated. Like,
That's true,
I think there's something in human nature that will enjoy those videos, right? Because they aren't exactly checkpoints, but there are sections in the game where you will fall back to and not beyond, right?
Yes, yeah, pretty much.
And so, you know, there will be sections that you repeat over and over and over, and it's as if there's a checkpoint, but it's because that's the sort of the point to which you will naturally fall when you fail to climb this particular surface, right?
Yeah. It has a slapstick element that makes it very YouTube friendly, which is something that it doesn't have in common with Stanley Parable or what was Davey Reedon's other game? I've completely blanked.
The Beginner's Guide?
Beginner's Guide, right? It doesn't have in common with those games. And I kind of like the fact that it's got such a relatively sophisticated thing to say about game design and says it explicitly. And
I think that's something that I will never hear because I'm so busy congratulating myself on not losing my temper, but it is because I'm holding on by the slimmest margin of like self-control and just wishing that I was better at it than I am and that I had slightly more control than I do. But I haven't thrown my keyboard out of the window, and that's a personal success. And so that's my inner monologue. And then I haven't got time for Bennett Foddy's nonsense. Like, I can hear him talking in the background. I will never be able to tell you what he said because I'm just so busy going, well done. You haven't lost your shit.
see, I've been quite enjoying it. I find it quite relaxing.
I thought I did, but then I realised that I was just telling myself that I did because I was going to go crazy.
You see, when I started playing it, something he says in the trailer is I could have done a very different game. I could have made a game that saves your progress. So it tells you early on, well, don't worry, we'll save everything you do, including the mistakes. And I assumed that was a lie. So I played it for half an hour thinking, I'm losing all of this progress when I quit the game. And I was completely okay with it. It's like, I'm just going to see how far I get. And actually it does save your progress. It saves exactly what you were doing, basically like even the position of the mouse cursor.
Right.
What that means is you can't quick save. So you can't get to the top of a section and then load your way back up.
Right.
If you fall back down to one of those sort of like kind of catch areas, then that's where your save will be. Right. But it does save. And so, I don't know, it is frustrating. It's got some good Steam reviews, some well-written Steam reviews. One of them is simply like, this is a game that uses, only 3 inputs, the mouse, Alt, and F4. Which I quite liked. But actually, yeah, so far, like, you go through like periods of kind of like, giddy kind of like acceleration and climbing, and then there's some very kind of frustrating bits and some bits where you have to slow down and force yourself to be patient and kind of work your way through it. And then there's also just like when you do fuck up, there's a kind of catharsis to that. It's like I've fallen all the way the fuck off this mountain now, and it is my fault. And Bennett Foddy reads you a quote by C.S. Lewis about failure, and you just move on or don't, and that's fine too. But I think the thing that, it almost doesn't bear too much over description because it's such a simple thing. But I think the thing that I think took it from like, because when I was hearing Tom F. describe it, it was kind of like, this is just a pure masochism. And it's a sort of an act of kind of, I assumed that the point he was making is that games can lead you into doing any kind of repetitive task in the name of winning. Right. But actually, I don't think it's quite at the expense of players. Even as much as it says, I made this game to hurt a certain kind of person. I don't think it really does. Like, I think it has a more kind of, a less wholly cynical thing to say about game design than that. It is ultimately like completely honest with you about what it is, and I think that's quite refreshing, and actually is honest about its influences as well, which is also refreshing. and a celebration of those influences. And I like that this game that has received so much mainstream YouTube coverage and has been on the top of the Steam charts, and only costs $5, might make people more aware of sort of, kind of fringe game design, or kind of like that kind of.
Do you think that they actually see those things, those qualities that you have highlighted, or do you think that it has been a sort of a novelty in the Goat Simulator vein?
I was so curious, so I had a look at YouTube this evening, and there is now a Markiplier video about sexy hiking with the kind of like, this is the game that he meant, it's Markiplier plays the game mentioned at the start of Getting Over It.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Interesting.
So that's definitely like a few million people who will see that now that would never have seen it otherwise. Which is genuinely interesting, right? Like,
yeah,
there isn't, that kind of attention hasn't been sort of directed at like, I don't know, like, Stephen Katamite's games by a source like this, right? It's nice to see those kinds of, an awareness, those kinds of games spread to a part of gaming that isn't likely to read the typical articles that direct people to those kinds of experiences. Right?
Yeah.
And that's just,
cool.
That's just a cool thing. Cause, because no amount of, I say this fondly, no quantity of PC Gamer or RPS articles about these kinds of games will get a certain portion of the audience to be aware that they exist. But a Markiplier video will. And that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So, no, that's interesting. I think it's one of those things where like I was just sort of struggling to see whether it was one of those things that was going to get dismissed as Sudi if you took it too seriously.
Yeah, I think I think it's a nice way of delivering. It reminds me, it feels to me like either a GDC talk or like a Video Brains talk or something like that.
Okay.
Delivered as a game. So yeah, it's Sudi and, it is a piece of games criticism. And if you don't want that, then you can switch off well, yes, you don't think you can switch off the audio, but you can put some music on and just play it as the funny hammer climbing game.
Yeah. Yeah, that's reasonable. That's interesting. We've had very different experiences of that fucking game.
So you just, frustration was your?
I think it was that thing where I'd convinced myself that I wasn't frustrated, and then by the time I left I was so angry that I never went back again. So that was a thin veneer that that peeled away pretty damn quickly.
Maybe I was just in the right mood for it. Maybe I'll go back and hate it.
Yeah, I think I'm not very patient, so I was never going to develop the sort of mouse control that you actually do need. Like I saw someone playing it today and they had a lot more of a feel for actual sort of finer control of the mouse to actually, negotiate particular sections. Whereas I get to the flailing point really quickly, and sometimes that will catapult you up the side surprisingly quickly. But once that doesn't work,
sometimes back down again as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, well, your game's broken.
I didn't win.
Exactly. Like, this is too hard. I'm bored. I'm going to play Animal Crossing. See also why I'm not interested in the Dark Souls remaster.
Yeah, quite. Yeah. Yes.
Praise the sun. Praise my bum. There we go. See? Some grown up grandstanding.
That's possibly one of the best things that's ever been written about Dark Souls.
Thank you.
And you said it out loud rather than write it down. I'll write it down.
Thanks. Good. Put it in the notes.
Yeah.
And then we'll be fine. That's some games criticism right there.
Indeed. Should we do some questions?
Yes.
We got some questions from the internet for Pip and Chris. Mostly Pip.
It's because I'm not usually here anymore, am I?
No. No. Found you on Little Grey Cells, though.
Yeah.
Which will be returning soon.
Yeah, we're going to try and record one this weekend.
Okay, our first question comes from Alex, who writes, a question for the rare Pip, which has appeared. Actually, not a question, just, how are you and how is life as a big shot PC gamer in Terrobang? Bonus real question, is the Georgia Aquarium the best in the world? Or if we had one chance to go to one aquarium worldwide, where should we go, Alex? So feel free to answer all of the above.
Things are well. I'm enjoying PC Gamer. That's nice. And I think I will always love to go to Georgia Aquarium just because I love checking in with the whale sharks and the sea dragons, and, you know, they have so many really awesome exhibits and, like, creatures with real, you know, little personalities and stuff, like the little, you know, the beluga whales and
Yeah, the beluga whale's very characterful.
Yeah, and the penguins, the African penguins and the sea otters and things like that. So cool. But yeah, so there's, that is a personal favourite, but there are loads that I would love to go to. So, you know, Monterey Bay Aquarium is one of those. So, and I really like the Bristol Aquarium because it's got a good seahorse program and
very good seahorse program.
Pacific octopus, called, I think her name's Luna. Yeah, and I really like, there's an aquarium in Berlin, sort of near the zoo, I think, might be attached to the zoo. And they had some amazing jellyfish displays when I was last there. So that was really cool.
Good. I suspected we'd get a good answer to that question.
But yeah, I always try and sort of check out the ethics of the place as well, you know? Try.
Next question comes from John Roberts, but not that John Roberts, a different John Roberts, but he nonetheless writes a question about art, which is confusing. Which real art style, watercolor, ink, etc., would you like to see in games more, like Okami's ink-drawn look?
Okay. So the style rather than the medium, right?
Yeah, or like the style of traditional art or like physical art, I guess.
So I really loved Sacramento because it was an art style you don't usually see. It was watercolor sketches and very bright and kind of loose. And I'm guessing that in games that's not as easy to translate because you want actual sort of hitboxes and stuff. You know, like you don't get to be quite as loose, I guess.
Yeah, it depends on the game, I suppose.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe it might be difficult to make those edges seem loose, if you see what I mean, rather than cutouts, right? The Collage Atlas is another sort of amazing one in terms of, you know, pen, like line work and just really fine pen drawings and things. But yeah, I miss the sort of the bright, loose watercolors. That's not a common style in video games, and I think it could stand to be more so.
Yeah, I think I agree. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to that, really. I like more sort of, less reliance on sort of cleanly defined shapes is something that I think video games have a kind of technical challenge to overcome. Kind of implementing those things.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Texture as well would be cool to sort of get more of a feel for.
Next question comes from Bean, who writes, Dearest Crate and Crowbar, following the super recent news of the Dark Souls 1 remaster, I saw the below image and was briefly very excited. What completely inappropriate feature would you love to have included in a remaster? Fondest regards, Bean. So the image is, requires a little backfilling. So Dark Souls Remaster was announced today at a Nintendo live stream, cause it's coming to the Switch. And it was announced alongside a new Switch version of the most recent Donkey Kong Country game, I think. But this, Donkey Kong Country game has a funky new mode where you play as presumably Funky Kong. And this is on the box as a sort of like, peel out kind of splash image, which people have been photoshopping on other game boxes all day, thus granting them a funky tropical new mode, including Dark Souls, which is very funny. And that's the image that we'll put in the show notes. So the question is really, what game would you like to see get a funky new mode in this mode?
I don't know. Because I think the games that I naturally gravitate towards tend to sort of have a sensibility where that wouldn't necessarily be at odds, right? Because I quite like upbeat games, right? Or like,
Right, yeah.
yeah, whereas you would be able to sort of have something funny
Yes.
because it would be Total War, funky, new.
Well, I think there's always space for a funky new mode in Total War. I was going to suggest Hellblade
Right.
because Hellblade, Funky Kong Sacrifice is a very different prospect to the game they did make, and probably for good reason.
Maybe, a funky, Bayonetta thing, just because like she's so busy being sexy and then suddenly like someone's funky kind of.
Yeah, it rarely has a kind of the funky lameness of Funky Kong is not represented in Bayonetta's
Hair sex lady.
sexy jazz oeuvre.
No, exactly, you see. So
Yeah.
I think that would throw her off her gut, off her stride.
Yeah, sort of this sort of injection of like noughties bro metal into that game. like the guy from Limp Bizkit showing up.
Really?
Yeah.
You went with Limp Bizkit?
I was trying to think
That's
of like
Sum 41.
men who have goatees was where my brain was at. There. Right. Little goatees and shades.
Or like Blink 182 or something.
Yeah.
I was thinking more along that and Sum 41 maybe.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Yeah. Sort of an Offspringy kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can't add this to Crazy Taxi, which is the game they're already closest to. Because that is nothing but funky new mode. Yeah, because obviously the obvious thing, like, I mean, you know, the official Doom Twitter account got out ahead of this today by actually just posting a picture of the Doom box with funky new mode on it. So it's kind of hard to think of more inappropriate venues.
Well, hang on, are you 100% sure that that's not what they're now doing?
Yeah. I mean, well, actually, who knows, honestly?
Exactly.
You know, it's 2018. Who knows what's going on? I don't. That's for sure.
We'll find out what it's the year of in Hearthstone soon, won't we? It was the year of the Kraken, then it was the year of the Mammoth. Now it's going to be the year of the, I don't know, like Jackdaw.
Jackdaws are pretty cool.
Yeah, I know. I'm just so Krakens, Mammoths.
That's
like,
true. Yeah. Yes.
That wasn't a dig at Jackdaws.
To be fair, yeah, I didn't assume you were having a dig at Mammoths or Kraken, really.
No, exactly. Anyway.
Next up, Amy writes, Dear Pip and people who are not Pip.
Yay!
Hi. The pod has delved several times into the difficulties of making games that adequately recreate the feel of good detective fiction. The only game, to my mind, that has managed to pull this off is Her Story, and I believe this is because it's one of the few detective games where you're now not piloting the avatar of an investigator in first or third person, but directly searching through evidence in a way where your physical actions match those of the character. This approach to the genre dates all the way back to the 1930s with both mystery parties and with a much greater parallel to Her Story, the crime dossiers of Dennis Wheatley, which were large case files filled with interview transcripts, photos, and even handleable samples of physical evidence or feelies. My question is this: can video games utilize this kind of approach? Is there now room, alongside the current board game renaissance, for a hybrid game where players can both investigate pieces of real evidence while also being able to use digital search tools, dialogue trees, and the like? For the non-pips, do you think there are other game genres that could benefit from the inclusion of physical objects as part of the gameplay? A spy game with a codebreaker, a stealth game with a printed map, etc. Keep up the Pipcast. Amy. P.S. You can still get hold of some of the old Wheatley dossiers, either originals from the 30s or very good replicas made in the 70s, for not a lot of money, and really not a lot of money, respectively. Worth getting if it sounds at all interesting to you. It's a very cool email.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, you'll need to break it down into what the questions were.
Well, so,
there were a few, I think.
Can video games utilize this kind of approach? They
have.
Her Story is the best example of.
But also, there were others that, I believe Amy said things about like, using online chat and websites and that kind of stuff. And In Memoriam does that. You sort of follow a breadcrumb trail across the internet using sort of clues and things. It's more of a, like you solve the thing and get the next clue, right?
Yeah.
But there's obviously capacity to get it wrong, and there's capacity to sort of faff for ages, or there was rather when it was active. I don't think it is anymore. But yeah, so that was very much a kind of pursuing a serial killer, right?
There's
Pursued.
I think the modern inheritor, a lot of these ideas are ARGs in a big way, and games that have kind of tied into that. I've actually completely blanked on the name of the game, but there was like a sort of limited run mystery game that came with like a physical book and phone numbers you could ring and those kinds of things to get evidence as a kind of big collective puzzle solving effort.
Yeah, there have been a few live events and things like that as well, where you interact with things. I think one of the things which makes Her Story stand out is that that you create an answer that satisfies yourself. You stop when you're satisfied, right? But like, it's not a case of that answer satisfying the game itself. There's no condition that you are meeting like you do in L.A. Noire, right? Like, there's a correct answer.
Right, yeah.
And a correct series of events and stuff. So I think that games, it would be cool if they played more. I mean, they do in sort of far more kind of indie circles and stuff, but it would be cool to sort of get more of a sense of people able to find ways to make a game that ends but that doesn't have a prescriptive ending.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it does.
Cool.
And it's something that, this kind of storytelling arrives in lots of different formats as well. It doesn't have to simply be single player things. Like, I don't talk about it a lot for reasons, but this is how the storytelling in hack mode is working and how it functions and how we've written it. And a lot of what I've been working on that game in the last 6 months is sort of seeding mysteries and giving players the power to find clues and piece things together if they want to, as a kind of approach to the game. That's an MMO, so there's lots of other things you can be doing, but going and looking for lost or encrypted or corrupted data and kind of try and piece together your own sense of what the mystery is something we worked on and built into the game. So the investigation can be a play style. It doesn't necessarily pay out in the same way that stealing things does, but it is an option and players do it. And, we're never going to tell them when they get it right, really. We will sometimes, something later on that might happen in the game might corroborate something that someone has assumed based on information they've dug out. Or it might be complicated by some new development that might challenge them. But, different types of games in that kind of game, we don't have to roll credits as soon as they get it right.
Yeah.
Things just keep going because that's how history tends to work, actually. And so, there's lots of different ways of approaching it. And I think, that's been heavily inspired by the way ARGs work. And the advantage of being an MMO in that case is that unlike an ARG, we don't have to reach an endpoint. We can just keep going, basically. And as long as we're kind of true to what we know is the case behind the scenes, then kind of the mystery keeps rolling and that kind of thing. Don't know if that makes sense either, but nonetheless.
Yeah, I think there's kind of shades of an answer to that. Yeah. I think something else that popped into my mind was the sort of the note-taking that I did in Her Story. I found myself doing in various forms when playing things like Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, or whatever that game is called, because you are passing on incomplete information and sharing incomplete information to sort of wobble towards a full picture. And sometimes it helps to write that down or to sort of develop shorthand for that to solve the puzzles and things. And it's not got that human sort of psychology and sort of the motivating factors and the, everything else that accompanies a mystery story. But it's got a lot of the imperfect collaboration. And
the physical prop as well.
Yeah. I think that's kind of why it came into my head was the sort of the games that benefit from a physical kind of element. Yeah, and also there's stuff like, Beasts of Balance. Is it still called Beasts of Balance? Is it Fantastic Beasts or something?
It's not. It was changed to Beasts of Balance from Fabulous Beasts.
Okay. I couldn't remember. But, because that is a thing that has physical and digital components about balancing pieces. It's not a PC game. It's, you play it using an app, but, that's another interesting one that takes a different approach. And also, I guess you can sort of look at the manifestation of games in physical spaces through merchandise as well. I mean, that's maybe getting a bit off topic, but it's a way that people try to incorporate elements of games into their physical lives in interesting ways. Like, you can kind of watch a Blizzard cinematic for Overwatch and get a feel for what they might advertise, right? I saw the one about May, and her ice station and stuff. And I was like, I bet they market those slippers, those little monster slippers. And yeah, you can buy those.
Right. Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, like the ways in which those spaces are now crossing over, because that's not just buying a thing with a logo on. That's buying a thing that a character a lot of people like in a game actually wore, right? And sort of cosplaying, but not.
Yeah, I mean, this might be like, I hesitate a lot to talk about Hackmud because, I never want to give anything away. But as of last night, I think it's safe to say that, over Christmas, we soft launched a physical card game, which I think is very good. I didn't design the card game, but I helped the game side of it. The physical card game is actually a preview of the PvP system. This is going to sound mental. I appreciate that we did this, but, the physical card game is a preview of an upcoming update to, the combat system for the game as a whole. And we buried the rules. We sold the cards without saying what they were, which is through as merch, basically. They're kind of nicely printed Hackmud themed cards, not traditional playing cards, specific to this game. And we, hid the rules in the fiction in encrypted and corrupted data over Christmas. So players got to a point basically yesterday where they basically figured it out. And now we've kind of like lifted the lid on that and kind of opened the secret a bit so we can answer specific rules questions and actually get onto the business of testing the game. So partly that's a kind of a way of, having a puzzle and having a twist and having something the players didn't expect, because we've done a lot of weird things and they didn't expect us to have like a physical card game alongside the game all of a sudden, that kind of thing. But it's really cool watching people, collaborate and create resources to help each other solve those problems as well. So it's not just about encouraging people, because we already do that in Hackmud. We already encourage people to go and learn how to use QR readers to solve problems and things like that, or use real world information. But actually the step beyond that, which I really like, is when people go off and create tools, program their own software to solve a problem that the game has given them, because then the world of the game gets bigger even than the software and the official stuff, to include tools that the community has made that allows them to kind of piece stuff
I think at this
together.
point we get into like subreddits and back to ARGs again, and also wikis and things.
Yeah, Discord channels.
Collaborative, not exactly problem solving, but people piecing lore together. They used to do it with the Grimoire cards in Destiny.
Right.
Sort of unpicking and, going through, for example, a bunch of gun names to figure out like crossover points and, puzzle all of that stuff out, which is, I guess, another type of detective work in games where there is an imperfect answer. Maybe someone has it written down in a master story file over at Bungie, but there's also the chance that they don't, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I suspect that they do.
Yeah, but it might just be that the stuff gets unfinished, or, the community draws a connection that actually isn't there, but it never gets corrected
Yeah.
because it's an interesting one, right?
Yeah, so this is something I have direct experience of, being on the other side of. I find I hesitate to talk about it because if anyone in the Hackman community listens to this, then I don't want to ever give a clue in an out of game format. But yeah, I think the most fun thing that can happen is when people are interestingly wrong. And not just because they've misinterpreted information, but because they've allowed their presumptions and their biases to steer them, and therefore, and then for their influence in the community to then steer other people. And that, I think, is a really interesting thing when it comes to game communities and the way they record and investigate kind of mystery fiction. Or this could be true of TV as well.
It doesn't actually mean that the connection isn't there either. It just means that that wasn't what was intended.
Well, I think I like to think of it a little bit closer to how real history works, where it's like, often it's impossible to get to the reality of history because you can just make the best guess you have with the information available. And so you get a lot of imperfect solutions. And it's only when something that comes along that complicates that people realize that maybe their initial assumptions were wrong. It's sort of
sure, but at this point, but the difference is that in history, you are dealing with events that did happen and trying to unpick how that worked. But in games, you could either choose to follow the direction that things have been sort of molded into, or you could choose to put out there something that actually does contradict it if you want them to pursue a different direction, or you could just leave it ambiguous, or it could just be that the community wants an answer to a thing that you as a development team haven't even broached, and so it's fine for them to sort of meander off on their own direction, but it wasn't even a branch of the law that you'd
for sure, like,
done anything with.
Yeah, because you have the opportunity to change. I think, I suspect, like, going beyond games, but like, I think any kind of mystery storytelling, it gets weaker the moment you start to make changes to the core story Bible in order to accommodate what the community's doing. Because chances are you haven't accounted for all of the consequences for that. I think the TV show Lost is the clearest example of this happening, and ultimately sort of the vast detriment of that show because they had no other way of landing it, and they decided that they didn't want to do the thing that people had guessed. So I'm a big fan of stick to the story Bible. Like, once it's written, and it may as well be history. But you can shift things about your approach. Anyway, that's inside baseball stuff but nonetheless, like, I think there's mileage for more of that kind of storytelling in games. Obviously, I think that because it's kind of what we're working on, but like, I really like the sort of hands-off approach to, like, as Amy says in this question, like giving people just the box of material and allowing them to piece it together how they want. And like her story, and like you say, not telling them when they've done it right, which I think is a really cool, and it expresses a lot of confidence in the player as well, which I think is really neat. The other side of this, which I suppose we have answered, is that, is there room for more physical kind of props and things to go with games?
I think that Kickstarter is exploring that because of backer rewards. It's finding things that don't feel hideously superfluous or tacky to entice people to give a little bit more money, whether that's a physical copy of a thing, whether that's, a map that accompanies something, whether it's limited edition, like, posters, whether it's their face in a thing, or, it's kind of an interesting point where people are figuring out the ways in which their specific game could be manifest as a physical entity or as an element, right?
For sure. And I suppose that sort of is the, probably a useful future for games on Kickstarter, simply because board games are so much bigger than video games on Kickstarter now. Like 5 times bigger in terms of money raised and success. And that's, I think, because there is this hunger for physical games and for, sort of, and maybe a better case for the kind of practical output of something like Kickstarter when that's the focus. Which is just an interesting thing. Our next question comes from Caroline, who writes, "Hello, I want to make a character again. My favorites have been 3D, but Dream Daddy's, and I think she means Dream Daddy's character creator, was really distinguished, I thought. What character creators did you enjoy recently? What let that character really shine throughout the game versus getting covered up by armor, etc.? I hope you are also very well. Caroline, P.S. Attached is a brief paper on an endangered species of moth that lives off dead turtle shells.
Thank you.
So I was thinking this because I haven't actually played a game recently that really makes use of character creation. Like, you know, game of the year last year for me was Torment, which famously does all of this through story, like in terms of visual character creation, basically non-existent. What have you been playing recently that...
So there's a few that have had character creators, probably most notably The Sims, but I actually don't like The Sims character creator.
How come?
I think it's because I tend to either try and create myself and fail, or I just don't really like the options that I end up with, right? Like, you know, it's things like I don't like the default set of clothes, right? So I would have to fork out money to get new options or fiddle around with mods or whatever else. And I think clothing is a big part of character in that game, right? And also just sort of, I think it's the sort of thing where I think it can end up too granular because you can alter so many different elements of the face, and without guidance you can end up with something that just looks weird or not quite what you wanted, and then you spend ages faffing and trying to get it to look kind of more how you thought, and then just going, oh sod it, I'll random the whole thing. Right? So I kind of struggle with the paralysis of choice almost. You know, cause you can alter the cheekbones, you can alter the puffiness of a cheek, you can alter the eyebrows, you can, I don't like things that are too prescriptive or only give you like 3 options or whatever, but when it's that kind of, okay, you can do anything, then I just can't find my way in, and I can't refine it properly, and then it just takes over like 3 hours, and I don't enjoy myself.
I've always quite enjoyed character creation. I think I got a kind of eye for it after a while. Like, sort of, I really liked doing it in Andromeda, and I was really pleased with I think I said this back when I was talking about Mass Effect Andromeda when it came out last year, but like I was really pleased with my Ryder and how she turned out and how she looked over the course of the game. Particularly in contrast to the reaction that the kind of default Ryder got given the animation problems that game had. I really genuinely liked it, and I kind of kept taking screenshots because I thought she looked cool. However, I know that other people had problems with the fact that the character creator was under a certain kind of light, and about 3 hours into the game you got walked out into a different kind of light, and you suddenly realized that your face is all weird. Which, I mean, to be, you know, that's not an unusual experience anyway. But, so yeah, I think I wouldn't be surprised to see games maybe move away from this sort of thing, partly because the benefit, I've started to question a little bit, I think, the benefit of it, because I know that stresses like yours and kind of worries about exactly how accurate it is, and the strain of trying to make someone that reflects your mind's eye when it's not exactly right is actually quite common. Like, I think a lot of people bounce off for that reason.
I think as well, the problem that I have when I'm in a situation where I feel like I'm being asked to create a version of myself is that it can tap into too many body image problems, and because that's something I've struggled with. I mean, broadly doing okay with now, but I think I wrote about this on RPS a couple of years ago, but it can be really difficult when you're then stuck with this avatar and you're trying to make it reflect how you look, but you aren't a reliable judge of how you look. And so you just end up with this massively distorted, weird thing that you can't connect with, but you don't know what's wrong with it. And that can actually just be quite upsetting as well. And so you just end up trying to do something completely different. But yeah, it's weird. I am not a fan of things that try and make, you know, that sort of invite you to create yourself. That's a bit like
Yeah, I managed to create the most generic person alive in the most generic video game protagonist man ever in the PUBG character creator, and that's a weird system. I'm not even wholly sure why it has one. Apart from, I suppose it does differentiate people, sort of, but
I accidentally spent Adam's hard-earned money on a shirt. Because I didn't realise that he'd been playing on the official RPS account back when I worked there. So it was like, sorry!
Good.
Yes.
Sorry, because I genuinely don't have a really good answer for like a good recent character creator, because I just haven't played a game that has used one effectively. And like I say,
I think I like that there tend to be more options now, because I do remember the days when I was growing up and it felt impossible to do anything that wasn't sort of fairly bland, right? Like,
yeah.
It now feels like a default that you can have brightly coloured hair, right?
That's true.
Game.
Yeah.
I've always been able to make Alice in recent times. There's always a bright blue option.
Right.
Whereas I remember the days of like, you've got very sort of, gender defined haircuts and, sort of really odd looking skin tones and, just it is getting more interesting and more varied in places. So that's a good thing. Sort of across the board. And some people are doing interesting things with regard to gender options, and like Ooblets is interesting because I think their approach to gender is that your character is just an avatar and that you can incorporate, any accessories, in terms of hairstyle, in terms of facial, like, styling. And it's not a case of you have swapped gender or something. It's just that your avatar happens to be wearing that stuff at this particular time and you can change it. And I think that's a nice way of doing things. And I think Mitsu's, red shirt had a gender slider and things like that. So that's really cool. Like that those things are cropping up more.
Yeah, totally. Our final question comes from Henry, who writes, Dear CCB, we've seen games, especially indie titles, embracing all kinds of genres, but do you think an interactive Broadway-style musical would work? I recently watched La La Land, and while now playing games, I imagine everyone, including monsters, zombies, and other foes, starting to sing and dance in the middle of a battle. But how would it work? Keep putting those casts. Henry from Germany. The clear answer to this is Elite Beat Agents.
Or Crypt of the Necrodancer.
Yeah, Crypt of the Necrodancer achieves this. I think I must have said this on the podcast before, but like, action sequences and dance sequences in films are fundamentally pretty much the same thing. And often have choreography and often take about the same amount of time and often serve a similar purpose, just with different methods. I don't think either works in that kind of cinematic sense in video games because you are in control. Games tend to be 100% action sequences because you control them, but they tend to be choreographed because you control them. Similarly, like the issue with a kind of musical theatre sequence, like the kind of, particularly what he's talking about, the kind of everyone, the opening scene of La La Land, the everyone, falls into place behind one another, street spanning dance number. The issue with that is it takes away the player's agency completely, which is something games don't want to do. Unless the NPCs are all following you and your lead, which is possible. But like, most rhythm games are great, but they're fundamentally Simon Says, you know what I mean? Like, you're not really kind of like controlling it or guiding it. You're not playing music. You are tapping to the beat.
I wonder if there's scope for something more dancey in, fighting games. Because they are so reliant on executing combos and things, and there's timing elements, and there is a choreography element to that, and it's reactive, but, so it'd be kind of interesting to see whether there's a kind of a dance-off lurking within that, right?
Yeah. Yes, I mean, it's literally a cosmetic change to the game, you know what I mean? Like, I think, Bayonetta is basically a musical. Like, pretty much like enough of those fight sequences happen to a backing song. And it's not quite the same. It's more like the soundtrack is great and the sort of rhythm of the game vaguely fits with it rather than it's literally a musical. But like, I'd say this about DMC as well, a game I like a lot because it matches music to its set pieces in a particular way. They're more like well soundtracked cinematic moments than like musical numbers, but I think a video game version of a musical would just, like you say, just turn that dial a little bit more explicitly to like, this is a dance off.
I know that I haven't played either of them, so I'm not going to sort of weigh in one way or the other, but I know that the two now Dominique Pamplemousse games have a reputation as, musicals.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yes. They are.
Well, they are, but
yeah.
I mean, that is a more explicitly perhaps what the questioner Henry is asking.
Cool. Well, that is all of the questions we've got time for. If you would like to send us a question for each episode, you can email us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can tweet us at Crate and Crowbar. You can hang out with our Discord community. You find the link to that on our website, crateandcrowbar.com. We're on YouTube, youtube.com/Crate and Crowbar, and on Patreon, at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. That's a lot of links that all have the word Crate and Crowbar in them.
Mm-hmm.
If you'd like to follow us as individuals, I'm on Twitter at CThurston, that's CTHURSTEN.
And I am at Philippa War, which is PHILIPPAWARR.
Thanks for podding, Pip.
Thank you for listening, Chris.
And thank you for listening, everybody.
Yes.